Hey everybody, Brock from Brock's Performance. Well, we are here in front of our perpetually partially assembled 2022 aka Gen 3 Hayabusa, and I wanted to real quickly show you how to install our clutch conversion kit. What's a conversion kit and why do you need it? Well, the new bikes are going to an assist clutch. And the thing about assist clutches are the Japanese love them. A lot of the European bikes are going to them. Harleys, Indians, everybody's going to them. They're a great invention. They really are. They're nice, buttery, smooth, soft lever pull. Plenty of compression to be able to lock the clutch up and not tearing stuff up. There's only one problem. They don't work for motorcycle drag racing if the rider has to modulate the clutch, which means stock wheelbase, short applications, big power applications where you're actually riding, not Chris Moore, 18 over swing arm, whack it as hard as you can and throw it. They'll work for that. I prefer this way better. But anyway, now if you're gonna attempt to do this kind of installation, I'm gonna go ahead and assume that you know how to pull your bodywork off. This bike's tore down way more than it needs to. The reality is you take off the right hand fairing just so you can get to the clutch cover. If you have problems with that, buy a service manual. Genuine Suzuki, they tell you everything that you need to know. And we have some additional instructions that we'll talk to you about once we get into it. But let's just go ahead and tear right into this thing. All right, if you're familiar with the channel, we've got this not exactly sophisticated way of keeping the bolts where they need to be. So I just grabbed a piece of cardboard, made a template real quick, and there you go. And all I'm basically doing is I want to put these screws right back in the same place they were. Now, for all of you wondering, they're all the same length, so you can put them in without having to worry about having one that's too long and breaking your cases and any of that other nightmare scenario. Now, one thing I will mention, let's say you have one of these and it's boogered up a little bit. Well, if you're maintaining your clutch like a drag racer does, you're getting in there all the time. So if you have one boogered screw and one boogered thread, you're fine. What happens if you take these, throw them on the ground or chuck them in a Folgers can? Well, every time you use that boogered screw, you're going to potentially damage additional threads. It's just a hassle. Man, how long does it take to make a cardboard template? So that's why we do it. All right, so let's enough soapboxing there. We've already removed that, obviously. I'm going to go ahead and pull off the clutch cover here for you. Get this out of the way. And then also the clutch cover gasket. Now, a lot of people don't realize this is an OEM graphite coated gasket. We will reuse these gaskets over and over and over again. Maybe you're the kind of guy that doesn't want to do that, and that's fine. Go for it. Change that thing every time you want. But I can tell you that just cleaning up the residue from both of those surfaces and putting this in will take you longer than the modification that we're going to perform. So anyway, enough of that also. Now, here we are. Here's our assist clutch. Let me actually, you know what? The best way for me to show you this, I'll start taking some things apart and I'll explain to you how it works as I'm doing that. All right, guys, to save me from having to answer the question over and over and over in the comments, what size socket is that? It's an 8mm socket that I use to pull the cover off. This is a 10mm, and all I'm gonna do is come in here. Now you can see with the assist clutch, you only have 3 springs. That's why it's so soft. But when you pull it apart, you want to sort of want to take them apart a little at a time, so everything doesn't, just so it doesn't bind up. All right. There you go. All right, so first thing we're going to do is just pull this thing off. There's your springs. These are not going to be reused. We're just going to set them aside so that they're not in our way. All right, so you saw there's only 3 springs. That's why you get the really soft clutch lever feel. But with really soft and only 3 springs, how can it clamp enough? Well, that's done through mechanical advantage. And we've got a video like this, it's very similar, but if you see this ramp, these 3 ramps here, and I'm going to go ahead and pull it apart so you can see it just a little bit better. This ramp, this ramp. So what happens is, during operation, as the rider slips the clutch, he's overcoming the 3 springs. Well, as soon as the bike begins to move, that movement is what clamps everything up. So basically you go from a really soft clutch to a mechanical advantage it's a lockup clutch. That's really what it does. This is a mechanical lockup. It's just different than what most people are used to seeing. And that lockup is what prevents you from really being able to slide the clutch and allow it to work well, to get good 60 foots, good 330s. That's why we're replacing this. So I'm gonna sort of show you a couple things here. Let me get organized. I'll be right back. All right, if I get you sort of zoom in here, this is the regular throw out. You've got a throw out bearing and you've got a washer here. This will be reused. Now, one of the things about the assist clutch is the first 3 plates actually mount here. You can see I'm sort of having to hold this up so it doesn't fall out. You'll also notice that the outermost plate is rotated 1 notch. So this is exactly how this clutch came from the factory. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and pull the first plate out. It's thick. The second plate out, it has a larger hole than typical. And the third plate, I'm just going to pull it out, and it also has a large hole. These 3 plates will no longer be used. We will be replacing them with other plates. So same deal. We're just going to set these aside so that they don't get in our way. All right, now that we have those plates out of the way, you can see how the clutch is set up here. Well, we're going to be replacing this inner clutch hub, or inner basket is the terminology. The outer basket's going to stay the same. So what I'm going to do, now Suzuki makes some nice tools for this. Motion Pro makes some nice holders, whatever. I just use my impact and protect my thumb. And basically, I'm just going to compress the clutch together. All I'm doing is pressing in on it enough to hold everything in place so I can get that off. All right. Now, the very first time, I don't know if you can see this, but the very first time I pulled this apart, it had what's called a stake on the nut. That's something that the factory does so that they don't have to worry about anything flying apart. Once we get past that stake, and sometimes it's so much you have to grind it off, you can't really get the nut off of there. But once we unscrew it, we reuse these and we don't worry about restaking them. So we're going to be reusing this part. We'll go ahead and set it here. And then this washer here is actually a spring washer that keeps everything from rattling apart. They really don't want these things rattling apart. I've never had one come loose. I've been doing this for 40 years, never had one come loose, but apparently it's a thing. So we're also going to keep that. Now, there's one final little washer here, and you can see it's really small, hard to get with these gloves. Hold on, let me grab a magnet. All right, this little small shim here, we're not going to reuse these. Some people will want to because they're worried about it galling up the clutch hub, but I'm going to explain to you why you don't need this after in a minute. So yet again, we're going to set that aside. We don't need it anymore. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just pull this apart, and I want to show you how simple this is. Now, sometimes you will have to, and I don't even know if I can find the original stake mark, but sometimes the stake mark it'll be so deep that you have to sort of put a towel down here and maybe take a file. Well, this one, I can't even see where the stake mark was. I'm not worried about that. But if you go to slide this out and it stops, that's what it is. If it's just got even a little bit of a burr there, it won't come out. We're going to go ahead and pull on this, and you can see it's going to slide right out. And behind it, there's this big old washer that we are also not going to reuse. All right, so I'm going to set that there, and then we're going to have a discussion about the parts that we're going to be replacing, putting in the place of the ones that we just removed. All right, for demonstration purposes here, I went ahead and grabbed some of the other pieces. This is the old pressure plate that goes in there. These are the 3 plates we removed and we weren't going to use anymore. And then this is the 3 spring setup. So, in a perfect world, we would just be able to, what we call it, backdate. Just backdate this to a previous model year. We've done it before with other bikes and mix and mingle some aftermarket parts to get you a really nice clutch that works great. Unfortunately, Suzuki didn't give us that option because on this particular motorcycle, they made the input shaft considerably longer. So what that means is the same parts, if you're familiar with the Gen 2 Hayabusa, you have an inner hub, our clutch mod, and a stock pressure plate. Well, stock pressure plates are great. They don't cost a lot of money. They're fairly tough. A lot of people use them. But in this particular instance, if you try to put this in, there's not enough room. And what happens is you can get it to fit, but what happens is this is pushed so far back, the push out, that as soon as your clutch begins to wear a little bit, you're done. You can't clamp it anymore, and it completely kills your clutch. Catastrophic failure. We're not in the business of selling people stuff that's going to fail. So what we had to do was take this out of the equation and create our own billet version. Let me talk to you about some of the advantages of that. All right, so when we compare our new billet pressure plate for the Gen 3 Hayabusa, you're going to notice something. If you can see this dish, that dish is what runs into all this mechanism here. So we had to remove that. We created our own, and you can see where this surface that ordinarily would be here is considerably further out. Well, this started as a billet block of aluminum. They're heavy. This is cast. They can be very, very inexpensively made, and they can also be light. They break. These will break every once in a while. So our job was to replace this, but we don't want to replace it with some big heavy brick. So we ended up making our own lightning holes. We also have some inspection holes, and I'm not going to get into all that. Maybe when we get into some more advanced tuning of the clutch, we'll deal with that. Right now, we're going to convert it to a Gen 2 Busa with our pressure plate. But one of the things that's really nice is we use SolidWorks, and we can actually design the part. We knew what the weight of this part was before we started. We realized that this was getting a little bit heavy, so we made arrangements to lighten it up. And believe it or not, even though this started as a real heavy chunk of 6061 aluminum, it is the exact same weight as the cast part. But it is much, much, much stronger, and this finish is a military spec hard anodized, which means that as long as you maintain your stuff the way you should, this should last not only the life of this motorcycle, but other engines, other bikes. This thing will be around for a long time. Same with our Ultra mods. So let's get into a couple other things here in just 1 minute. All right, guys, I'm going to show you a little racer trick we've shown in other videos before, but I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way because we're finished with it for real this time. And then I'm just going to take this entire clutch pack and I'm going to lift it up. And if you notice, there's some little shim washers. That's called a judder spring. I'm going to flip it upside down and shake all that off of there. Now, we're going to set this aside. Don't need it. I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to flip it up this way and just sort of hang it here on the foot peg. The reason I flipped it that way is that This is the order that it's going back in exactly the same order. We're just going to be adding a few extra parts. So once I get everything ready, I'll just be able to go from here, in, here, in, here, in. Makes it much, much simpler to do. You don't have to count. You don't have to look for smooth spots on the steel plates, none of that. So let me show you what we're going to do from there. Okay, if you remember, this washer was there stock. Big old thick washer. We include a thinner washer so that the Gen 2 parts will fit. So we're going to take this washer, and it doesn't matter which way it's flipped. Just put it in, and it'll stay there. Now, we're going to install the inner basket. Before we do that, I'm going to have a little side note here on our Ultramod, because this is one of the few parts that the installation of this becomes very critical. So let me grab some instructions and show you what I mean. All right, I don't even think we figured out how we're going to package all this yet, but I do know that you will be receiving a Billet Ultramod packed like this. It has the Ultramod itself, the spring shim spacers, and then the washers that go under the studs. When you scan the QR code on the back or look for it at brocksperformance.com, you are going to end up with these very, very detailed instructions. Now, what are these instructions for? Are they to be left on the ground? Sopped up oil? Wipe our rear end? No. Use these. They're very, very critical, because one of the things that has to happen, and I see this problem all the time, which is why I want to address it. Some guys will put everything together, they'll put the Ultramod in, and they'll try and hold everything in place while they torque these studs. Well, if you're at the racetrack and you see someone and their studs come out with their springs, know that those people did not follow our instructions. They did not put those studs in correctly. The correct way to do that is to follow the instructions. The threads of this have to be clean, the threads of the studs have to be clean, and then we use Loctite red and we torque it to the specs. Now, this is a crazy 11 millimeter pattern here, so we have to use an 11 millimeter socket. But hold this in a vise and make sure that it doesn't move. Torque it down, let's see, 18 foot-pounds, which is also 25 Newton meters, and just make sure that you get these studs in the best way you can. It'll save you a whole hell of a lot of hassle at the racetrack. But all right, that was enough side note. Let's get back to putting stuff together. All right, guys, when you get the stuff out of the package, it's going to be pretty clean, but you're going to want to clean it yourself. And then all we're going to do, we're going to install this. You've got your little pockets here, got your fingers here. Make sure that they go in. And you can actually see, we put an inspection hole in here so you can sort of make sure that everything's lined up. I don't know if you can see that or not. Now we're just going to take this entire assembly with our thin washer in place, this thin washer. That has to be in place, and then we're just going to slide this over the shaft. Same deal. If that doesn't slide on, you may need to file the shaft just a little bit, but you get it in here, and now you'll be ready to start putting some of the other parts together. We also include this washer because the shaft is longer than the Gen 2 that we're converting it to. We include this washer. That goes on next. Now, if you look at the coating on this washer, this is also the mil-spec hard anodized. If it was just regular aluminum, we would have used that little shim washer that I told you about, but we tried to make it a little nicer for you. We used the mil-spec so you don't have to worry about it galling. So we just forget about that, put that in. And then this is it's called a diaphragm spring washer. You can see it's angled up this way. The whole idea is it puts pressure on this nut in case it starts to back off. It puts pressure on it to keep it from vibrating loose. So we're going to go ahead and take this. If it was making a cone, the cone would face out towards the engine. Slip that over, and now we're going to take this nut and put it back on. I had already filed it. You don't want it to get into the threads. Some guys they like to replace these nuts, but the problem is the nut you get is going to have a stake mark on it too. You're in the same boat. So just be careful with this one. File it up real good. Make sure that you can't, put splinters in your fingers. And now this is the kind of deal where Should I Loctite that? Some guys will, but I mean, the only guys I've ever seen do that have had a problem, and if they had a problem, it's because they didn't put it together correctly in the first place. So we don't mess with that. We just make sure everything's plenty clean. Now, we have that. Now, I'll show you a little trick that I've got here also here. Just one second. All right, guys, before we start putting the clutch pack back in, I just want to show you a little something here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to take, and I'm not trying to put full torque on this thing yet. I'm just trying to make sure that it is tightened up enough, which, by the way, that's a 30 millimeter socket we're using. Once again, if you're torque happy, man, grab all your tools, torque that thing down perfectly. That's awesome. I'm going to go racing while you're torquing. So anyway, I'm just going to take this real quick, hold it here, and just give it a quick shot. Like I said, we're not trying to bash the thing in there, rip the threads out. But what that allows you to do is now, does this spin freely? Do you feel any grab? Of course, you've got transmission parts back there. There's going to be a little friction. There's also going to be friction on some of the steels. But if your clutch basket doesn't spin like that, your inner clutch hub, inner basket, inner hub. If it doesn't do that, stop. You've got something wrong. I don't know what it is. You'll have to figure it out. A lot of times it's because the outer basket has moved, and there's some different parts on the backside that'll get out of whack. So you just have to put it back. But when you put it back, it has to spin freely like that. All right, now installing the clutch pack right after this. Okay, once again, these are the pieces that we took out. You've got 2 thick plates and 1 thin plate with a bigger hole. Those will now be replaced by 1 thick plate, 1 thin plate, and another thin plate that doesn't have the large hole. Why? Because these are the parts that go together with these parts to duplicate a Gen 2 Hayabusa clutch pack. So one of the things I wanted to do, because I get the question all the time. Well, first of all, the very first part here, this is a flat washer. That goes in first because there's no coating on the back of this. So if you don't have the flat washer there, then when you put your spring washer in, aka judder spring, right? I just moved it this way. On the judder spring, if it was making a cone, the cone faces in towards the engine. So we're going to take that and we're just going to put it in and let that be right there. If I've heard it once, I've heard it a million times. Brock, what's the stack height? Hold on, fellas. I'm just going to pull this clutch off of here real quickly, hold it in my hand, and then I'm going to take the 2 pieces that we're going to be, or the 3 pieces that we're going to be adding, I'm going to stack it to it. And then right here, for everyone to see, I'm going to measure the stack height, 1.977 inches. I could write a book on how that changes, whether it be wear to the clutch plates, whether it be soaking them in oil all night so they blow up like those kids' toys that you throw in the bathtub. They swell up and all this. Brock, it's not 1.977. I can't go down the track. It's just a reference. If you're off by the thickness of this plate, it matters. Otherwise, that's all you need to know. And now I'm going to go ahead and leave that, and I'll show you what I did. There's the thin plate. There's the thin metal. And then this is the thick one. We're going to go ahead and put the thickest plate on the outside. So now I put it right back, and our job is to very meticulously rotate and install. All right. I'd like to point something out. I'm not going to get into the microfiche and, well, this plate's dimpled, this one's not. This is a different color, this one's not. That's beyond this. All we're doing is converting this over to a Gen 2, and I can tell you, all we have to do is put this back the way the way that it was and add those parts, and we'll be fine. Now, should I be putting oil on the plates? If I were going racing or something, I probably would. Should I let them soak overnight? Man, if you like that, go for it. For what we're doing here, just converting it over, it's just not necessary. This is also a brand new bike with very few runs on it, so we're just going to keep on going. And I can tell you that what we are doing right now, all of these metal plates, the rounded edges are facing in towards the engine. That's the way it came apart from Suzuki, so that's the way we're putting it back. Okay, now we are to our brand new plate. That is a plate that I do want to oil. Let me grab some real quick and I'll show you what I do. All right, guys, we practice what we preach. I had found a bottle of Allison here. All I'm going to do is just throw me a little in there. Let this thing sort of set at a bit of an angle. And then all we're trying to do, didn't quite put enough. All we're trying to do is just get this all the way saturated. Ignore my numbers. that was when I was figuring all this stuff out. So now we'll go ahead and put this in. Now, if I could get you to zoom in, you'll notice that all of the fibers that I've put in up to this point, they all go into the deeper trough. This is the shallow trough. This is the deeper trough. So now I'm going to take this, the replacement steel plate. I'm going to take the rounded edge, face it in. Now I'm going to go ahead and lube up the thick plate. But Brock, the thick isn't on the outside. It's on the inside. It's in the middle. It's wherever. Man, put it wherever. So long as that stack height we just showed you is the same, really doesn't make any difference. So I'm just getting that off of there. Now, the very last plate, that is incorrect. That's in the deeper trough. We want to rotate it to be in the shallower trough. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. If you accidentally rotate the second plate into the shallower trough, your clutch won't work. As soon as you try to take your bike for a ride, it's just going to slip. As soon as you give it any power, it's going to slip like mad. That tells you that you put it together incorrectly. So now that we have it installed correctly, I'm going to wipe the goo off my fingers here. And I want to show you something. Back to that torque spec. I'm going to go ahead and hit this thing pretty hard with this with my finger on the fiber plate, but I want you to watch this inner hub. You see it spin? If it didn't spin, I could be over torquing the needle bearings in there and really causing problems. The fact that it spins means that I'm not over torquing it, but I can tell you that's plenty of torque to keep it together. Yet again, please don't tell me about your torque spec. Do it the way you want to do it. This is how I do it. Works great. All right, let's get into the final assembly before we hopefully have this thing ride ready soon. All right, guys, with your kit, we're including Gen 2 OEM springs, the standard retainer screw, and we call it a spring shim. That's our 180 thousandths. All we're trying to do is get this to that Gen 2 combination that we know works best for 80% of the people. Can you take this further? Yes, that'll be in a different video. But for now, all we have to worry about, and I'm just gonna set this up here and without the throw out, because that wants to push it out the whole time. But all we're gonna do here now, let's just take this and make sure that it fits up okay. There you go. Nice, should be fairly tight, but also move in and out easily. That thing fits great, so we don't have to worry about any problems there. I do want to point something out, and if you're a racer, you're going to really appreciate what we've done since we had the freedom to produce this plate out of billet. The first thing you're going to notice is all these additional holes. Why? Well, one of the problems that you run into is if your stack height begins to get too low and you're not watching it, your pressure plate right here can bottom out on this inner basket. Let me show you what I mean here. On the inner hub. Watch my terminology. So basically what happens is this part jams up against this. Well, that's metal on metal. You can't compress your clutch any longer if you've got metal on metal. That means you've got a problem, you need to fix it. But one of the things that we did, ordinarily, it'd be metal on metal back here and completely blind, so you would have no idea that it's going on. Now, not only do we give you a witness hole so you can look for it, but we also give you a place to put your calipers. So if you're the kind of guy that wants your clutch to go the exact same time, every single time, well, that's called air gap. You can actually monitor your air gap with our pressure plate and make adjustments if you deem them necessary. Some guys will just switch thin plates, thick plates. They'll adjust their stack. Once again, that's getting off a little further, but for you diehard racers, I think you're really going to appreciate that. The other thing that we did, once we fit this in, all right, what is your installed spring height? Well, one of the things that we made sure that we didn't have too much material here, so we can take our calipers, we can go right inside the hole. Well, here, let me show you this. And now, 1.100. That's what the installed height is on this particular setup. But it makes it really easy for you to know what it is. So if you've got a spring tester, you duplicate that installed height, and then you can calculate exactly what kind of spring pressure you have. So anyway, just little tidbits to make things a little bit nicer for you. All right, so now we are basically just going to put this thing back together. If you've seen any of my clutch videos before, this is a hydraulic clutch, so it's always going to be taking the free play out of the lever. So to fix that, we push it all the way in, far as we can, and then we fight against time while watch it creep back, right? So we have to put the pressure plate back on before that causes a bind. It's really simple. Boom, done. Now, I'm just going to take these, and if you're familiar with our instructions, we always put the spacers on the outside of the spring. We even gave you a nice little lead in here to help them see it properly. And then typically what I'll do, just put two across from each other, come in here and very gently all right. Now, you'll notice I didn't torque those with the with the gun. That's just I'm just trying to assemble them a little bit tighter. Let me go ahead and put the rest of these in, and I'll talk to you about the torque we put on those shortly. All right. Just to backtrack on you a little bit. The clutch hub nut, if you do want to torque it, the Gen 2 Busa spec is 108.5 foot-pounds or 150 Newton meters. That is a hell of a lot of torque. I promise you we didn't over-torque it just then. And then as far as the spring studs, 18 foot-pounds, which is 25 Newton meters. Now, yet again, torque them if you want. What I like doing is just taking a 1/4-inch drive ratchet, and this is all brand new stuff, so it should all be torquing to about the same spec. But one of the things I can do with a 1/4-inch drive, I can just go in and feel. If you're not comfortable with that, with feeling, just torque them. But one of the things I like is that, got a jank ratchet here. One of the things I like is that if you're at the racetrack and you're trying to use your torque wrench and it's way out here, the chances of you breaking one of these off or stripping it out just go way up. If you've got a 1/4 inch drive, you can feel it when it's getting ready to fail. Don't let it fail. Pull it apart and fix it. That's the reason I do this. And the internet naysayers hate it, and I don't really care what they think because I like doing it this way. Now, before we put the cover on, it's always a good idea to check to make sure that the pressure plate and everything is functioning correctly. So I'm going to get some of this gook off my, well, actually not yet. I have one more thing to do, but I'm going to go over to the other side of the bike. I'm going to cycle the clutch, make sure it's got a smooth operation. And while I'm doing that, I want you guys to watch the pressure plate move here. All right, that reminded me, asterisks. When we put 6 springs with spacers that are stronger, your clutch lever play is going to be more severe. My guess on that one, and that's all it is, I haven't actually measured it, is probably 10 to 15% more. These things are butter smooth, so 10-15% isn't anything. You start getting into our clutch cushions, and especially like a real street setup, man, now you've got a lot more lever pull. That's not what this is. We're just trying to duplicate a really nice Gen 2 setup for street / hot racetrack use, but also on the street. So now all I'm going to do is make sure that I'm not forgetting anything. I'm going to put the clutch cover back on. I'm going to put my oil back in the bike, and I'm done. So as always, guys, if you have any questions, if you look at our videos, look in the comments section. You're not going to see a bunch of idiots talking bad and saying that you don't know what you're doing, because I don't let them. I kick them out. I'm not interested in that. If you have a question, please feel free to ask, and I answer almost all those comments. The only time I don't is if a customer would happen to jump in with the correct answer that did it as well as I can. I leave it alone. That's the right answer. So anyway, till next time, I'm Brock from Brock's Performance. We'll see you then.